Hello everyone. In this video related to academic writing tips, I want to talk a little bit about your knowledge of the topic. It's really important, regardless of what you're writing about, that you have a thorough understanding of the topic. Now remember, I had mentioned in an earlier video, every introduction, good introduction, will bring up a topic. It will show or demonstrate that there's some sort of problem with the topic. Maybe there's something that hasn't been figured out yet. Maybe there's something incomplete. Maybe there's something that hasn't been said. So it will surface a problem with the topic, and then it will propose a solution or an intended steps toward a solution with what we call an argument. And then it will provide steps on how to develop that argument. That's pretty much a paper, an academic paper. Well, it's really important that you understand the topic you're talking about. Not too long ago, I graded several papers from students who were counseling students taking a counseling and theology class. And they were given a set of different doctrines that they could write about. And the idea was to develop these doctrines to kind of show this is the topic, let's say in this instance, the inspiration of Scripture, and use that topic to determine what the problem would be. Perhaps that individuals counselors do not use the Scripture because they don't trust the trustworthy, or they don't feel it's trustworthy. In other words, so they have a problem with understanding inspiration. And therefore they need to learn more about the doctrine of inspiration, let's say. Something like that. That might be the argument. Well, one of the things that became painfully obvious to me is that many of the students did not know what inspiration meant. In other words, they were taking, and I think I mentioned this in a prior video, but they would write things like, let me explain this in that scenario. The inspiration of Scripture is the doctrine some of it's based in 2 Timothy 3, 16, 17, for instance, where it talks about how all Scripture is inspired by God and useful for teaching, reproof, correction, training in righteousness, so the man of God may be equipped for every good work. And so what it really means is the Scripture comes from God, it's breathed out by God, through the writers of Scripture who were inspired and carried along, Peter tells us, carried along by this thing called inspiration to write what God wanted written to communicate and reveal Himself to people. Obviously with the overall theme of the redemption of mankind through Jesus Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. So that's what inspiration means. But what I could see very quickly was that the individuals, many of them were taking inspired to mean something that inspired them to motivate them to do something. So, Scripture has been inspired to help this group of people overcome oppression or something like that. And it really didn't have anything to do with the topic. So it told me as the professor really quickly, they didn't understand the topic. The topic could be found in any normal or any average systematic theology book. There's usually an entire chapter on it. And so what you need to be able to do before you write your paper is you need to have a thorough understanding of the topic. In that scenario, the writer, the researcher simply needs to read and become very familiar with the different view, like what it is, define what inspiration of Scripture means using credible resources, let's say good systematic theology books. Focus on the very passages of Scripture that teach the doctrine, and then look at some commentaries, for instance, that explain the actual biblical passages. That would give you a lot of information in order for you then to find out, hey, where are some problems with this as it relates to counseling, for instance. But see, if you don't have a proper understanding of the topic, you really don't know what you're talking about. I remember a movie several years ago called Mr. Mom that Michael Keaton played in. And he was trying to be a hands-on, handyman type father, and he was talking about a plug in the wall, and they come in 110 volt. There's a 110 volt kind of plug, and then there's the bigger volt, which is like a 220. And the guy was asking him how he had done this, and he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "Did you use a 110?" "Yeah, 110, 112, whatever it takes." And it showed by The way he responded, he didn't know what he was talking about. Well, make sure as an academic writer, you know what you're talking about by being thoroughly familiar with the topic, the subject matter at hand. If you'll do that, it makes your argument and your problem identification and the argument to solve the problem much easier. Well, I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them or comments. Leave them down in the comments section. I love interacting with you there. God bless, and I'll talk to you in the next video.